What is up, Fantasyland? Welcome to the GOAT District via the PlayerProfiler Network. We have a very special edition of the GOAT District, the FFPC, aka the Fantasy Football Players Championship. They're considered the World Series of Poker of Fantasyland. They've been a big partner, big supporter of the GOAT District, as well as PlayerProfiler, as you guys know, over the past few years. Tonight, we take you backstage with one of the co-owners, co-founders of the FFPC. Then we do a deep dive into the NFC North with him as the host of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Eric Balkman, aka Balky, is with us tonight. Guys, we have a huge show. So grab a cold one, sit back, and let's get it.
You know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We're back in the GOAT District on a Wednesday night as we do it in the Player Profiler Network. And we have a monster show, Dan, as usual tonight. We're going backstage to the FFPC. We've got the FFPC live drafts just around the corner in Vegas. You and I will be attending as the men joining us tonight. And we've got one of the founders tonight that we're gonna deep dive in, see how the company started, where the direction's going. A lot of exciting stuff on the site right now and a lot more coming. And we've got, of course, the man with the beard of the offseason, that's for sure. You know him as Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. He's joining us tonight. You see these two men with us. Guys, remember to subscribe not only to the Player Profiler channel as you see us tonight, but we have the GOAT District YouTube channel. Make sure you go subscribe over there. Dan and I are dropping some the Owner Lounge episodes. We just dropped Fine-Tuning a Dynasty Champion, which is a high-stakes FFPC Dynasty team. Dan and I won last year the hard way, and then we made a couple offers in that episode trying to upgrade at certain positions. And then we've got some ball-in episodes we just dropped, and we've got more coming. I sat down with Matty Kiwoom and did a 125 buy-in, 200K FFPC BBT, one of my favorite tournaments on the site. And we tag teamed that thing like the Heart Foundation, Dan, that good old Canadian wrestling tag team. Let's get to our guests, man. We got a big show tonight. You know the man below me, Eric Balkman. Balky? What do you prefer, Eric? I was on with you. You kind of gave me the red carpet, but tonight you're the guest. So what do you want to be addressed by?
I think most people in the HSFF industry know me as Balky, so I'm good with Balky. But JD, listen, whatever you want, I'm good with.
Awesome. So
that's my fault. But yeah, no, whatever you want to call me, I'm good. Just let's keep the slurs to a minimum tonight. We're all going to be happy.
And then below Dan, we've got Alex Kaganovski from the FFPC, one of the founders, one of the owners. He's one of the reasons that we are here tonight, that Dan and I still do this show. They've been a big supporter, a big partner of ours from the beginning, even before we came on YouTube, when we were just a small little podcast. We were always passionate about the FFPC. They were supportive from the beginning, and we appreciate that. So we love having them tonight. Alex, we love having you back in the district. We appreciate your time.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So Dan, we're gonna start off, like we said when you and I were kind of putting this show together. A lot of people on Player Profiler, are newer to the GOAT district, and some of them might be new to the FFPC. They might not already be playing on myffpc.com, where they can sign up right now for some awesome tournaments, whether best ball, redraft, or dynasty. But we wanted to kind of do a bit of a backstage, give a people not only maybe an introduction to the newer people, but maybe a look behind the curtain for those that are familiar with the FFPC and that are already playing on the site and maybe aren't as familiar with kind of the history and that kind of thing. So Alex, we'll start with you. How did the FFPC start, and how did you start with the site?
Yeah, it's every time I get a chance to tell the story, it's fun to think back, and especially for audiences that may not be familiar with some of the history of high stakes fantasy football, specifically season long, as it goes back to kind of the old days 20 years ago. A lot of people tend to think that maybe 8 to 10 years ago is kind of when it all started, when DraftKings and FanDuel came on the scene, but it really does go well beyond before that. And for me, it started in 2002 when I joined something called the World Championship of Fantasy Football, which at the time was a revolutionary contest. Never been anything like this in the fantasy world, and it was started by a couple of old school veterans in the industry, Lenny Papano, Emil Kadlik. They're still in the industry now. But, we all flew down to Las Vegas at the time. There was really no internet drafting. I mean, there was an internet, obviously, but internet drafting was really not that big of a thing. We all flew to Vegas, and we played for $200,000, I believe, at the time. And we all entered, it was over $1,000 to enter, and, all the expenses. I mean, back then it was a big, big deal, and it was revolutionary. And that's where I met my partner, Dave Gerzak. And we started kind of playing that, and that became a huge part of our life. And a few years later, I'm going to fast forward. There's a lot of history that kind of happened over those years, but that was really the reason the FFPC was launched, because someone else actually had the foresight of launching another contest, the World Championship of Fantasy Football, before us. But we felt we could do it a little differently, a little better, possibly. And we launched the FFPC in 2008. So it was a tiny little event. It was kind of piggybacking at the time off the World Championship of Fantasy Football. And it was really just, kind of like we didn't know what we were doing, honestly. And that's really where it started. So that's kind of the genesis. And then, it just took off from there. It took off slowly but surely, but it took off.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, one of the things that you've brought to the space was, I believe you guys were the first ones to fully escrow prize money. Is that true?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we launched the FFPC. There was a lot of, again, going back to kind of the Wild West of fantasy sports back then. A lot of contests were folding. The World Championship of Fantasy Football eventually folded, not paying out tons of money with new ownership, by the way. I don't want to throw the original, gangsters under the bus. It was done by the new ownership. But back then, Dan, it was a wild, wild west. There was no regulations. There was no licensing. And there was a lot of kind of cottage industry, fantasy sites that ended up folding, and a lot of people got screwed.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard a lot of stories from back in those days about people who got screwed. I was not on the scene quite yet. I was playing fantasy football, but I just wasn't doing it at quite that level. So that's one of the things that really drew me to the FFPC, was just knowing that, hey, the money is safe. We know that, and that's a great place to start from.
We decided before the regulatory rules were in place that's kind of what we wanted to do as part of our marketing strategy, but also it's something we felt was the right thing to do, to show the customers that, your money is protected. And, that actually, it to this day, it looks like you remember those days. So, then, years later, we started getting licensed, and now we're obviously licensed and regulated. So, the escrow, that changed over the years. Now we answer into a higher authority, so to speak, like Hebrew National. But back then, yeah, we just did it because we thought it was the right thing to do.
And I'll piggyback on that too. And I think Alex hammered this point home, but I just want to emphasize it too. Like before anything was going on with the WCOF, with the new owners and everything, where they were defaulting and they weren't paying out players. The FFPC started like with the escrow, like that was a big thing. So prior to any of this thing happening, all these things happening with the WCOF, the FFPC was a little bit ahead of the curve in escrowing prize funds. And I think not necessarily year one, Alex, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like year two, year three, that's where the leaps and bounds were with the FFPC.
Yeah. Well, we had a feeling that we knew where, that other organization was heading. And, so we, again, seeing all this craziness in the industry, we felt it was really important. But yeah, a few years later, that organization was gone, and a lot of those players came over to us. And that, I think it was 2010, I want to say, where we made a pretty big leap forward. We started increasing our grand prizes, increasing our contest. Obviously, it was no longer just live events in Las Vegas. The online drafting became a really big deal. Although everyone waited till like August and July and August to draft. Of course, now we're drafting in, before the Super Bowl in January, right? So we've came a long way. But all of that took years and years to kind of, every year it's like, hey, why don't we start the draft in April? And why don't we start the draft in March? Why don't we start them in January? So.
I don't know anybody, Alex, who might have pressured you to do so.
Yeah, right. Who would ever do that?
Who would ever do that? No one here, that's for sure.
And I'll tell you this, guys, just real quick. That's always players influence that. Like players are always, we're not the ones like trying to release it early. Like the players are always requesting it.
Yep, without a doubt. I can definitely say I know that I used to badger Alex incessantly about getting those contests going and everything, and I appreciate the fact that you guys have been very responsive on that too. And let's talk a little bit about that, Alex. I mean, hold on.
Oh,
sorry.
Hold on.
Yeah, you got
buddy. We got our friends, the FFPC. We've got our friends, the PlayerProfiler. We got to abide by some guidelines here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a quick break. We're going to go a quick message from our sponsors who we have on tonight. And we're going to come back and talk about one of my favorite reasons. You guys just touched on one of them, what brought me to the FFPC. But one of the reasons I've continued to play and invest on the FFPC is for something we're going to talk about. Dan, you were just about to touch on it, but I want to keep the surprise. So let's go to a message from our sponsors and we'll be right back after this.
Hey, people always ask me, what's the World Series of Fantasy? What's the Super Bowl of Fantasy? And it's easy. It's the FFPC. Their signature Players Championship has a $6 million prize pool. And their best ball leagues start in February. And they're the answer to so many questions. Hey, what's the best place to get a Dynasty Orphan? Well, you can adopt a Dynasty Orphan at the FFPC right now. There's more orphans at the FFPC than anywhere else on the internet. That's why we partner with them. So if you want to play fantasy football for low, medium, high stakes, you love Dynasty, you love best ball, you love seasonal leagues, all types of fantasy footballers need to go to the FFPC. And remember, use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you $25 off your first team. Promo code Underworld, $25 off your first team, no matter what the format is, at the FFPC. Go get it.
And we're back. So, Dan, you started touching on it. This is something I did want to bring up because, like I said, this is one of the reasons I kept playing on the FFPC. Look, I was like a Canadian kid that was kind of felt alone when it came to fantasy football online because none of my friends played, that were locally anyways. And then there's the money safety aspect, which you guys touched on. But there's nothing worse with dealing with a website and you can't reach anyone, and you've got an issue, especially if you're in a draft and you've invested, a few $100s, maybe a couple thousand, whatever it is that you're investing, and there's an issue. I don't know, Dan. I'm pretty sure this is what you were going to touch on. But my favorite thing right now with the FFPC, someone who's been playing on it for a long time, is Chris and the customer service level, which these days I don't see that level of customer service. That personal touch, the urgency, the sense of urgency that we feel when we're in the draft room, that's the urgency you get in the response. Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that before we pass to Alex.
No, I think that's about perfectly stated. So, congratulations, Alex, on having a fine person running the nuts and bolts of the show. I mean, I just cannot imagine what it would be like without her. So, appreciate all that she brings. We want to make sure we mention her as well, and let Alex talk a little bit about her, what she means on the business end too.
Yeah, and it's all roads kind of go back to years ago. Chris Lambert is the person you're talking about, and that's a her, by the way, not a him. And a lot of people make that mistake initially because she sends the email, and Chris, she's Christina, but she writes Chris, and they're like, "Hey, dude," and she's like, "Not a dude." So, but she actually goes back to the World Championship of Fantasy Football to 2002. She is a very good friend of Lenny, the guy who started that company, that contest. And when new ownership took over, she came over and started working with us. I believe it was 2009, and she became kind of the cog. I mean, she is the white glove service that people just can't offer. Nobody can offer really, because she wakes up at 4 a.m. Sometimes she has a crazy schedule, I must say. I don't force her to do it, but she wakes up and people are like, "Hey, why do I have a timestamp of 4 a.m. of you answering emails?" But that's kind of what she does, and we've heard that for years and years. And she has that personal touch. She has the personal relationship with a lot of customers. Now over the years, it's thousands of customers. Before, it used to be just a handful, or a few hundred. And now it's really everybody that touches her, that she touches, realizes how important she is. And she actually started mentoring over the last few years. She started mentoring some of the new customer service, crop of the FFPC. So we're all kind of following that lead, that customer service is super important, and we try to answer our emails as soon as possible and try to do the best job we can.
I've never seen a company quite so responsive. Really at all hours, as you mentioned. I'm a little bit surprised sometimes with how late she's up or how early she's up. So it's fantastic. I also wanted to ask, what are you doing to differentiate the FFPC in kind of a crowded space, right? There's a lot of competition coming in. We hear a lot about, there's Underdog is really big. There's Drafters. There's, of course, all the DFS, and then other sites as well that are doing just kind of the season-long stuff. But, what do you do to differentiate in that space, Alex, and kind of keep the FFPC fresh?
Well, what we've kind of, I think, realized over the years as we started to grow, what we wanted to do is kind of introduce as many new, players to the FFPC as possible, and to expand the community, right? We have our high state community, and you guys all know each other. There's, a few thousand of you, and you guys are all on Twitter and in the private chats, Discord, whatever it may be. But you don't want to just keep banging heads against with each other constantly. I mean, I know you do, but I think what we realized, we really wanted to bring as many new and fresh faces to the FFPC. That was a big goal of ours, and nobody really was doing it to the degree kind of that we felt was important. And as we started to do that, we were able to grow the contest, and every year when as some of our contests grew, we were kind of surprised, and now finally we got to the point where we're offering $2 million grand prize contest, and it's kind of like, wow, we're getting there. We are where we never thought we would be, but now that is our differentiator. The FFPC, our new slogan is "We make millionaires," and that's kind of what we want to do. We want to continue making millionaires, 2, 3 per year, maybe 4, maybe 5 a year as the rest of our contests grow. Maybe we'll have $1 million playoff challenge, $1 million best ball tournament. So, that's really it's bringing in the new users, the new players, introducing them to the format, keeping season long alive, flag alive. There's no crazy formats. There's no salary caps. There's no pick 'em games and all the formats to learn. It's just fantasy football, just like and love, and just keep making millionaires. That's kind of that's where we that's our pitch, right, Balky?
I think to Alex's point, managed leagues, and while we do plenty of best ball, I mean, we do best ball a ton over the course of the last half decade plus. I think the thing to keep in mind here is we all kind of grew up playing fantasy football with managed leagues where we're drafting with our buddies, we're placing waivers every week, we're setting lineups every week. And I think sometimes that kind of gets forgotten in this space. But we've created a really cool community of a lot of high stakes players and some non-high stakes players, and quite frankly, a lot of non-high stakes players that have come up that have started off with like a $5 best ball league and they really like it. And then they up it to like a $35 the next year. Then the next year they're playing in the Fantasy Pros Championship. And then the next year they're playing for $1 million in the main event. Well, now you can play $1 million in the Fantasy Pros Championship and the main event as well. So I think that the thing to keep in mind here and something that we don't really bring out as much is like, the fantasy football that you grew up on with your family, with your office, with your friends, with, whatever, your college buddies. Like, this is sort of like the community that we have here. And each and every year, organically, it grows more and more, which makes the prizes deeper, which makes the prizes bigger. And like Dave Gerzak always says, we've created a really cool community with a lot of like-minded fantasy football players. And we love people to be a part of it. I don't know anybody who's become a part of it and are like, oh, God, to hell with these guys, I'm out. Most people, once they're in, they're like, God, this is awesome. And it's what we strive for.
Yeah. And the differentiation is, from best ball is great. I mean, we all love best ball, right? You draft as many teams as you can. But, and of course, you could talk about that and the strategy, and there's still plenty of banter. But there's nothing like season long. It's like Dynasty. There's nothing like Dynasty. It creates the level of the type of community that other formats do not and never will. DFS didn't, these pick'em games won't, and best ball won't. It's only season long that creates this type of community.
Mm-hmm. And that's something we're big on is you need all three, man. Like, it's like being an athlete and just playing the games and, practice. Talk about practice. We say it often, best ball is just practice, right? The real money, the $1 million, I mean, that's what you're after, right? We call it the Millie Billies on our show. And look, that's Dan and I, we're FFPC. That's how we met. That's how we know each other. He's one of my best friends now, and it's all through the FFPC, as well as Theo and Andrew, so you guys, the community that you guys build, there's sub branches of that. We've seen the Pros versus Joes, which we were, lucky enough or awesome enough to win last year, whichever one you want to chalk it up as. But you guys put that together for the community with Darren over there at Fantasy Mojo. You guys do a lot for the community, and we appreciate that. And we appreciate, like you said, that little high stakes community is cool, man. It's like a little family,
Yeah. And Dan is part of the live draft family, which is a whole different community entirely.
Oh, I'm coming. I'm coming, Alex.
JD is going to be out there this year.
I'll be there.
I told his wife that when we met out in Portugal, I said, I'm taking him out to Vegas, and you can't do anything about it. So, sure enough.
Well, be careful, because now once you go there, you may never not go again. You become a lifer. I mean, that's what a lot of our Dan knows these people. I mean, they're lifers, and that's what they call themselves. They do not miss this for anything, even during COVID.
I showed up in 2012, and this is kind of this is one of the things I like about the FFPC. I did a football guys contest the previous year, and I won a main event. And I'm like, why do I want to sit at home and draft this thing? Why wouldn't I go out to Vegas and draft it? I didn't know a soul out in Vegas, really. But I got out there, and man, what an experience. I mean, it was just fantastic. Just so much going on, and you're going around, and there's a lot of people, that I didn't know personally, but I knew them by name and reputation and everything else. And, just getting to meet these people and find out, hey, they put on their pants one leg at a time like everybody else. They're very, very normal people. They're very friendly people. They love to talk about fantasy football. They love to, so, you go out there, and it's not like, you're just on your own or anything like that. I mean, all you have to do is just say hi around your draft table, and pretty soon you're meeting other people and other people. So it's a great experience.
And to that point, Dan, I mean, your experience is not unique, and sometimes it's not even like, hey, how's it going? I'm Eric Balkman from Wisconsin. Sometimes it's just like you go like at break, you're like, oh God, I was really hoping I'd get Kyle Pitts there, and you snaked him from me, and then stuff like that just branches off, and all of a sudden, lifelong friendships, right? And podcasts are developed, and websites are developed based on people meeting each other out at the FFPC. And it's so great every single year. And I know it sounds cheesy or whatever, but that is the honest to God truth, is people make, they go out there like you, Dan, and I know plenty of other people have gone out there, didn't know a soul, and then they didn't want to leave, or they couldn't wait to come back the next year to hang out with these people. And I think it was a couple of players have referred to it as like Christmas Day, right? Because they're unwrapping their presents. They only see these people once a year or what have you out in Las Vegas. It's a lot like a holiday where you're coming home to meet your family and hang out with them. Only the difference is a lot of people just love their family in this aspect, where that's not always the case at Thanksgiving and Christmas or what have you. Like, you get to choose your friends out at the FFPC, which we like.
And it's the big secret, actually. The live events, even though they're not a secret per se, but the big secret is what an awesome time it is. And people are like, I have to, the ones that don't know, they're like, oh, I gotta, fly all the way out to Vegas just to draft a team, and I could do that at home from the computer. No, that's the secret sauce. Mm-hmm. That's the part that JD will experience. That's the part that Dan got in 2012 when he arrived. And, and people who were with us, back in the old days of the World Championship of Fantasy Football, I was there. See, that's how I know, because I was there in 2002 for the World Championship of Fantasy Football. I walked into that ballroom. So I know exactly what you guys are experiencing, and it's freaking amazing. And I never wanted to stop.
Yep, exactly. And the nice thing is, I mentioned how I got there. I won a football guys, which got me a main event, and that's one thing you guys do really well. You offer a lot of opportunities to level up. You could start at $5 if you want to. It's a lot easier to start at $35, but you can start at $5 if you want to. It's a nice way to learn the game, and but you can do $35 league. You can win a $350 league. And then the next year you can win a $350 league, and you can be going out to the main event. And you spent $35, and 2 years later you're at the main event.
Yeah, we have more of those people. Like Balky actually mentioned that, more than you would think. Just a ton of people can't come in, and they may have used some promo years ago, and they got some $35 at like $25 off, whatever the case may be. And the next thing they know, like a few years later, they're playing multiple main events, and they're playing multiple dynasties.
And a lot of our audience,
the world. Yeah,
a lot of our audience, Alex, we hear those stories in the DMs. We name it from Harry Snowman to 1912, like all those guys. You hear those stories; they tell us in the DMs all the time. Joey is another guy that tells us often that he started listening to our show, jumped on the FFPC, started with something small, and now he's got dynasty teams. He's in the redraft tournaments, and they get excited about it. And it's like you said, you get a taste of it, and you're hooked. I know my first run was in a football guys, Dan. I was 5th place going into the last weekend. I've told this story before. I had Andrew Luck, my favorite quarterback, at the helms, and he just went to Jacksonville and shit the bed, and I finished in 22nd that year. But just that taste, I've been after it since, and I can't wait to go to Vegas. So guys, if you haven't checked it out, go right now, myffpc.com, sign up for the main event. You can sign up to the time slots. They're all there right now. You can sign up for the tournament, plan your schedule, plan your flights if you need to, your hotel. I know I just went on, booked it right away, talked to Dan about some dates, and we've got a couple of drafts we're going to be doing. I know Dan's got way more. He's a popular guy down there. But no, it's going to be a good time. We're definitely looking forward to it. Before we get to the NFC North, Alex, is there anything, whether it's about the Vegas drafts or anything else about the FFPC that's coming up, or something that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure that the listeners know about?
At this point, there's really not much more to talk about it. I mean, you get to, if you want to draft, it's August. You get to the FFPC, you get to the site, you decide how much you kind of, what your level of entry is, man, and you just dive in. There's leagues filling morning, afternoon, night, late night. Weekends are going to be absolutely crazy. Balky's commissioning a lot of the big drafts. So he knows. I mean, it's going to be absolutely insane. It's kind of, like, you don't have to wait around. I think is probably the most important thing to realize. You don't have to wait around. The leagues are filling very, very quickly, which is kind of rare in the industry outside of only a handful of places, including us. So I'm happy to. I always like to throw that in because a lot of people just are used to like, I enter a league and then I got to wait 2 days to fill. Well, those days are over. It's August, baby. It's draft season.
And you can do live. You can do slow drafts, 2 hour, 6 hour. There's different ways you can do it. Slim, 28 deep.
Sit and goes. Everything.
Yeah, there's too many options for you to choose from. So make sure you check it out, myffpc.com. Balky, before we get into the NFL stuff, the fantasy stuff, how did you get involved with the FFPC? And what exactly is your role? Like, are you the secret silent president?
No, absolutely not. No. Interestingly enough, so co-founder Dave Gerzak, I actually work with him at another business, and he kind of subcontracted me and said, "Hey, I need you to help me out with this new fantasy football business." And he and I have played fantasy football for 20 plus years, so we knew. We're kind of on the same page as far as fantasy football goes. So, funny enough, like the way I got into it, JD, was I would be staying up late. This was when the FFPC started in 2008 or whatever. I would be staying up late, and he would send me pictures of draft boards via email. This was before when we had people to like enter in the actual, drafts or whatever. He would send, so I'd it's like 10 o'clock Vegas time. It's like 12, midnight Central time for me. And he's sending me these pictures of draft boards, and I would stay up till probably about 4 or 5 in the morning entering in entering in the rosters for these. And then sort of, I don't know what it was like. I don't know if Dave and Alex had a conversation like, God, Balky's really good at this data entry. Maybe we should expand his role a little bit. I don't know what it was. But from there, like my role kind of expanded. Then, I continued to do that every year. Then I was commissioning online drafts. Then Dave pitched me the idea of doing the high stakes fantasy football hour, basically on a Wednesday. People don't know this. He basically pitched it to me, an idea is like, hey, on a random Wednesday in whatever it was, April or something, he's like, we're going live with the high stakes fantasy football hour on Friday. I'm like, what? And 2 days later, we had a guest booked. David Hubbard was our first ever guest.
Nice.
We had it booked 2 days later, and now we've been doing that show for 13 years. It's expanded to the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. It's expanded to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network, and it's just taken off from there. You guys have seen me out in Vegas, Dan. I know you have, where I facilitate some of the 10K, the 5K, the 3K leagues out there with the High Society, the Big Payback, and Varsity, and it's been quite a ride. So kind of like, I would never say I'm the FFPC janitor, but I do a lot of stuff. I do a lot of stuff that needs to be done. I do a lot of obviously stuff with media. I mean, you can catch me on Sirius XM.
Being up on aisle 4.
Exactly. That's what I do. And like when I get that message, I'm like, okay, here's my mop, here's my bucket. Let's get this wiped up.
What's the fancy word for janitor again? What is that?
Custodian. I'm the FFPC custodian.
Sanitation engineer, sort of.
Exactly. Yeah, something like that. To piggyback, the last thing I want to say about coming out to live in Vegas, and I know this sounds hokey, and it's going to come off as hokey, and I don't care. But there's a lot of times we tell people like, "Hey, come out to Vegas, draft live. You won't forget it. It's an unbelievable experience." And we say that, and a lot of people are like, "Okay, well, that's I've heard this sales pitch before. I don't really need to go out to Vegas." But I'll tell you, the people who have taken advantage of it, I've countless, dozens of people have come up to me. Balky, you were totally right. FFPC was totally right. Drafting live with all these other people It's so much better than drafting online. And drafting online is fun. Plenty of people go to Vegas, also draft online. But I'm telling you, and I'll just pitch this, it's not a line that we're feeding you. This is actually a great experience. You can do whatever the heck you want in Vegas, and drafting with 11 other like-minded people or several other like-minded people if you're playing multiple drafts out there. It's truly an awesome experience, and I would encourage everybody to do it.
It is a show out there, no doubt about it. You will see people in costume. You will, you will have some crazy interactions at the draft table. I mean, it's just it's so much fun because you are literally sitting down at a table with everybody who's going to be in the league with you, and you kind of. You just get a chance to know who it is that you're drafting against, and there might be the one guy that you're like, you know what, I couldn't stand him, I'm going to beat his ass. But more of the time, it's like, hey, these guys are pretty cool, and you just kind of enjoy the competition a little bit more throughout the year because of that fact. And also, the last thing is, I mean, the backdrop is Vegas. Come on, guys and gals. Even if the FFPC, you don't like the live drafts, and I can't imagine that you would ever say that, you still got Vegas in the background going on 24/7 around you. I mean, who can have a bad time in Vegas?
And guys, face it, if you're in the US and you're not north of the border like I am, it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to fly to Vegas, first of all.
Right.
Second of all, the FFPC has a deal with Planet Hollywood, which I took advantage of for a discounted rate on the rooms. So that's another way you can save to go there. The same way you pay for a subscription for RotoViz or one of these sites, and you consider that as your investment into the season. This is you investing in your drafts. You're taking your game to the next level. You're spending a couple grand, over $1,000 on an entry. That's part of the investment, is the flight, the hotel, the experience. Step it up. You want to step up your game. That's part of it. And that's I think we pitched it enough. I mean, you guys go out there and experience for yourself and come back to us. If you're not satisfied, Alex will give you all your money back. He told us.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I've never pitched the live events or heard a group of people pitch the live events as much as we just did here in the last half hour, because that's not what we do necessarily. Yeah. Live event, like I said, it's kind of like a secret society type of thing. So we are, if whoever listened to this, if you're not signing up this year or definitely next year for the live events, then we have totally failed. This pitch has been a failure.
Yeah, no, but at the same time, that's why we wanted to have Alex on, because we know you guys are not a in your face type of marketing strategy. So we wanted to give the opportunity because we talk about it and we think maybe people already know about it because they're watching the show and they see the name, but I think this gave a really good kind of backstage pass, as we called it, peek behind the curtain. So hopefully you guys got value out of that. Balky, before we get into the NFC North, we're going to touch on a bit of news. We're going to have to do a bit more of a rapid fire just to respect the schedule that we're on the Player Profiler Network, but we will load those last 20 minutes. Balky, the Fantasy Pros just happened. You guys did how many drafts? Name some people who were involved other than obviously the GOAT District. How did it go? And just what do you want people to know about the Pros versus Joes tournament?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a great tournament every single year. We cover it live on the HSFF Hour and on the FFPC YouTube channel, and it's obviously we get the most eyes on it. It's tremendous. Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com basically organizes this every single year. The Joes are drawn randomly from everybody signed up for the FFPC main event, so we're basically getting the best players in the world. We're in the FFPC main event going against the FFPC pros, the best pros in the world, of which you guys are the defending champs. Congratulations to you defending the belt, JD, Dan Williamson, and Theo Greminger. So good luck in doing that this year. But it's so much fun, because I think a lot of people, especially people who follow these guys and subscribe to the content on their websites or on Twitter or whatever, they're of the belief that these guys are the best players in the world. And then as the FFPC Pros versus Joes results show every single year, the pros maybe aren't the best players in the world. Because, and you guys, and you're technically pros, but all you guys play in the FFPC significantly, so you kind of know, obviously the dual flex, the tight end premium, you kind of know how these drafts go. But like the Joes consistently are very well represented on the top of the leaderboard every single year, and I think for us to be able to put this on where we're pitting 6 people that are ponying up, the better part of $2,000 to go for $1 million in the FFPC main event versus 6 other people that are in the FFPC or in the fantasy football industry, it's so compelling to see strategies clash and different builds and obviously team construction. It goes haywire every single draft because you can build your draft any which way that you want to try to win your main event league to get into the 2024 FFPC main event. I love it. I love covering these drafts. I love seeing the best the FFPC has to offer versus the best that fantasy football the industry has to offer every single year. And we're going to continue it going forward, and it's such a joy being able to watch it, up close with the first front row seat. And then it's also awesome that we're last few years we've been broadcasting it via video, so everybody else basically has that front row seat, and you can check it out for yourself, and then maybe try to beat these FFPC Joes in the main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship as well.
Yeah, it's a great tournament. Dan was initially invited the first. Was it last year, Dan? You were invited as a pros. Dan was generous enough to include to make it kind of like a GOAT district, draft. Mm-hmm. And Dan, Theo, like you said, was involved. Andrew Schellenberg was the fourth. The 4 of us drafted, and we took it down. And now we're going to enjoy that prize in Vegas. We're going to do that live draft, which is again, yes, going back to kind of that upscaling that you can do on the site. Now, let's get into the goodness. Eric, you're in Wisconsin. You mentioned it. Probably a Green Bay Packer fan. I'm sure people know that. You've got a new quarterback. You guys kind of like the Colts had that. The back-to-back. We had Manning and then Luck, and then that didn't go so well. But you guys had obviously Favre and then Rodgers. How do you feel about Jordan Love as a Packers fan? How do you feel about him for 2023 fantasy-wise? And what pieces do you like around him in that offense?
Well, just to kind of talk about what I've been saying about Love for the better part of the year, I don't think he's going to be – I think he could be a Pro Bowler. I don't think he's ever going to be an All-Pro. I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I think the streak of back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Green Bay stops with Jordan Love. And that's not an indictment on Love. I mean, certainly there's a non-zero chance that he could be a Hall of Famer. I don't see it happening. The difference here is, and why I'm excited about the Packers offense this year, probably not as much as Dave Terpoli, who co-hosts a lot of the FFPC Pro Series with Joe's. He's higher on the Packers offense than I am. But I think Love's going to be all right. And the fact that you can get him as, between quarterback 15 and quarterback 22 right now, when you're drafting for $1 million in the Fantasy Pros Championship or the main event, I think that's right where he should be going. I think he's going to be okay. As far as his weapons go, I think 2023 could be the learning year, right? And I think 2023 is going to be a year where Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Musgrave, Kraft, all these guys kind of grow up with Love. So it's going to be a little bit rough. So for best ball, yeah, I can get on board with these guys. Redraft right now, JD, I'll tell you that I like the value that you can get on Romeo Dobbs. I like the value that you can get on Luke Musgrave. These are guys that have been talked up in camp. Musgrave, I know, has probably been reported as probably the most reported thing about him has been his drops. But the thing is, and I think this is overlooked, he is running way ahead of the other guys, Josiah DeGuara, Tyler Davis, Tucker Kraft. He's running way ahead of these guys with the ones this year. And I think, the last time the Packers invested this high of draft capital in tight ends, it worked out with him, with not only Jermichael Finley, but Bubba Franks as well. Say what you will about Bubba Franks. Dude was a Pro Bowler for what it's worth. So I like Musgrave late, especially in a tight end premium format like the FFPC. Jaden Reed, I know, is getting steamed up by a lot of people, a lot of high-stakes players late, as it looks like he's going to be the starting slot receiver in Green Bay. I'm shying away from Watson because I think people are loving Watson too much right now. I think Dobbs, especially in a full PPR format like the FFPC, makes a lot of sense when you can get him, especially in the early double-digit rounds of the Fantasy Pros Championship, the main event. I really like that there. I think Matt Schneidman, by the way, covers the Packers from The Athletic. He said like a month ago, who's going to lead? Somebody was asking him who's going to lead the Packers in receptions, and he said it's going to be Dobbs. So Watson is interesting for best ball, but for me, the disparity of 6.5, 7 rounds To me, I'd rather have Dobbs over Watson. I like Musgrave late. I still think Aaron Jones chronically, this is not a Jordan Love thing. I think Aaron Jones has been chronically undervalued in drafts, even under Aaron Rodgers. So I think he's a great pick this year. I'm not a big A.J. Dillon guy. I've never been a big A.J. Dillon guy. So I'm probably fading guys like Watson and Dillon. I'm willing to take stabs on Musgrave and Reed late. And then I think there's a case to be said if you want a decent number 4 receiver, decent number 5 receiver with a certain amount of upside. I think Romeo Dobbs fits that bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to with Watson because he was so dominant last year. He just looked like a beast, especially in the red zone. But we talk about it often on this show. When you have a new quarterback, you never know which way he's going to go, who he's going to gravitate to, which obviously the offense is going to favor the more talented guys. But I'll say this about the drops guys. I don't know, Dan. Do you remember this kid named Jamar Chase when he first came in camp, was dropping a couple balls?
I'll tell you even a better one. And this JD, this hits home even closer to Green Bay. Devontae Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Green Bay Packers fans wanted this guy cut. Not even his rookie year, his second year. They're like, wait, this is a wasted pick. Get rid of Adams. This guy's going to be a massive bust. That was a guy who struggled with drops for a while, and now he's arguably the best receiver in pro football behind Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, so some guys take a little longer to learn. Some guys, it's football. They're getting thrown bombs from these guys. Like they're going to drop a couple in training camp. Give them a break. Alex, is there anyone we haven't talked about, or is there someone maybe that we did mention that you do like in this Green Bay offense going into 2023? And how bullish are you on them, if at all?
Well, I was waiting for you to put me on the spot so that I could admit to something that I'm a little bit embarrassed about. And
now I'm curious.
Balky knows this a little bit, but I do not do any fantasy studying until around August, which is starting right now. I literally, and the reason I think what I realize is I start to get consumed by the FFPC and it starts to get, and I love fantasy, so I start to get too consumed by that as well, and it starts to be too much for me. So I do have to obviously prepare for some of my drafts, and I will do that now. But at this point, like I haven't even looked at a depth chart. So some of the names that Eric was mentioning I don't even know who those guys are.
Well, Alex, you know what you should speak to is all the slot receivers for your beloved Giants this year, because that's something that we're trying to figure that out for fantasy. Like who's the Giants receiver to own, because they're all going super late right now.
Please tell us.
Yes.
Yeah, that we kind of laugh about that with some of my Giant fans. Believe me, I'm certainly not one to learn, to know any insight that others don't. But there is a strategy. I don't know. Everyone, there's a name for every draft strategy. I don't know what the name for this one is, but draft the last guy available. Is that what's the name of that strategy?
Yes. There's got to be. That sounds like a goat district strategy, Dan. We do that often.
Yeah,
it sounds like my Patriots running back strategy.
Exactly. That's exactly where it's from. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think drafting, maybe not the very last guy available, but kind of like if you put, let's say, the top 5 or 6 of them that you feel have a shot, because a couple of them might get cut before it's all said and done. You would assume, right? I mean, they're not going to go into the season with 8 freaking munchkin wide receivers, are they? I mean, but yeah. Anyway, that's what my recommendation is. Don't try to figure it out. Just take the 4th or 5th guy available.
Oh, man, that's like, it's a message we often repeat here, because we say we don't know shit. Like people think they know everything that's going to happen. And that's one thing I never try to pretend is I don't know shit. Like I don't know who's going to be starting. I don't know, especially in these obscure situations. And Dan, we've talked about that often. You talk about the Patriots running back, because that's the classic, is taking the last guy, the best value, when there's now you're starting to hear like the Miami backfield. You wanted to hit on that kind of obscurity in our draft recently.
Yep. Yeah. Humility when it comes to drafting is definitely, it can be a costly lesson if you let it be, or it can come a little cheaper. And it's a lot easier if it comes cheaper. Just be humble to start with, and don't think you know more than everybody else. That's the most important thing right there for sure.
To that point, Dan, like that's something I struggled with, especially having all these great guests on the HSFF Hour. Even though that these guests that we've had on have won 5 and 6 figure grand prizes and now 7-figure grand prizes, like sometimes they come out and be like, what are these guys talking about? Like their strategy makes no sense. I can't believe this worked out for them. And I would say it took me, and I'm embarrassed to say this, it took me about 4 or 5 years into doing the HSFF Hour before I realized, you know what, maybe I should actually put pride aside, open up my mind to some things that have obviously been working out for some of these players. Some of them have had multiple appearances on the podcast because they know what they're doing. And it goes back to and I don't know who said this, it might have been Confucius, but it was something like, the wise man knows that there is much he doesn't know. And ever since I've adapted that philosophy to fantasy football, I think it's made me a more well-rounded player. And I think the way that you guys do your stream and your podcast, everything, like you never purport to know everything. You never purport to say this is the right way to do it, guys. You're always opening things up to like, you can do this strategy. We're open to this here. And there's a lot of different ways to win, especially in the FFPC. And I think that you guys drive that home. And it's something that I've tried to bring into my mind as a player in my private leagues or what have you over the course of, ever since I've adopted this like 10 years or so ago. I think that's so important for everybody who's watching this to understand, like, before you just, poo-poo somebody who says something, really analyze it and look at it from the standpoint of like, okay, if this guy is wrong, why is he wrong? If this woman is spouting off stuff that is not true, why is she lying here? Like, you have to like really break it down. And I think for me, oftentimes when I do that, I find out, you know what, there is some truth to what they're saying here, and I should probably adapt it to the way I draft and manage my leagues.
And that applies to everything in life, right? Being open and open-minded, to that opens doors to everything, right? As opposed to like kind of being shut down and thinking my way is the only way, I know everything. And I think we're lucky we have an audience that seems open. They come in our chat, they discuss, everybody banters, good questions. Mm-hmm. We don't pretend to know more. Dan and I bring people that have had success, like you said, Balky, they're doing something right, yes. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not listening to the programming, the content that's out there. The guys that have done it, that's something Dan and I have always focused on. We want people on the show that have done it, not guys that just think that their strategy works. We want people who walk the walk, that are in the leagues, that are in the draft rooms, that know the draft boards, and that are winning, on a more regular basis. And those are the guys that we try to bring on to the show. And that, I think, is where you get the value. But yeah, you got to be open-minded, I think, in all aspects of life. We talked about dropping the ball. The guy that's in the news, unfortunately, he's a guy I was stacking off, and especially with Goff, is Jameson Williams in Detroit. I don't know, Balky, if you were high on him coming in. He's got the gambling suspension. I believe is 4 games, right, Dan? 6 games, even worse. Yep. So 6-game suspension. He's dropping balls, and then just the cherry on the Sunday, like just to make things even better, he gets in a skirmish in training camp. So, I mean, how worried are you, Balky? Is this just like off-season stuff we're going to forget about when this guy comes back? Are you worried about it? Is this like another Stephen Ridley, Michael Thomas off-field guy we got to worry about? Where are you on the young receiver in Detroit?
Yeah, quite frankly, and I know this is going to sound terrible, I'm loving it. Like this is great. Like I was never
one that was going to be the answer.
No. I'm not. I was never a Jameson Williams guy. Especially when you come in. Think about dynasty rookie drafts. He's coming off the ACL, and I was like, I really want to waste a guy who is probably not going to play at all his rookie season, or even if he does, it's not going to be significant. So I kind of faded him there. Now he's coming in with the suspension this year. The other stuff like the drops and getting into fisticuffs with his teammates in Lions camp, that doesn't make a difference to me. What makes a difference to me, and I look at the Fantasy Pros Championship ADP with him right now, wide receiver 49 in the 10th round for a team, by the way, that has I don't want to say Super Bowl aspirations, but there's a lot of people on the Lions bandwagon this year. Guys, Dan, you know this. You're an NFC North guy. The Lions defense is historically bad. If they had the opportunity to upgrade it, they did not in free agency and the NFL draft. Maybe a little bit, but not enough. So the Lions are going to put up a lot of points this year. I love Laporta. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jahmyr Gibbs is going crazy high in drafts. We saw him in the second round in the FFPC Pros versus Joes this week. So I think for Jameson Williams to be able to get a piece of that offense, and quite frankly, a significant piece of that offense, to get him now in double-digit rounds after guys like Cortland Sutton, Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnston, Elijah Moore, like I'm on board with that at that price. Now, if he starts making plays and, people are really talking him up, at that point, maybe I'll be out on Jameson Williams. But right now, at the 10:03 for his ADP, yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a wonderful thing when you can just actually afford to sit a player like that on your bench, because you can when it's a 10th round player. When you're talking a 4th or 5th round player, it's really tough to afford to sit somebody on a bench for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever the case may be. And for him, it would be 6 weeks. So I love that discount. Otherwise, there's no chance I could be drafting him.
It's roster construction, right? Dan, last night we drafted Mims, and there's injury news, but you're not drafting these guys for the first half of the season. You're drafting for that boost in the second half. You're taking guys like Marvin Jones in the first half to kind of complement, in your build. So you got to be strategic with it. But if you're smart in your build, you can include these guys, and they can still win you. And right now they're at a discount, right, with all the bad news going on right now. So take advantage of that. Let's go to Dan's neck of the woods, Minnesota. Madison, unfortunately, today I heard was limping off the field. I'm not a Madison guy, not someone I've invested in. I might be totally missing the boat on it. I'm investing kind of like Alex's, strategy, taking those late guys and Ty Chandler and Dwayne McBride. Dan, maybe we'll let Balky answer, and then you can give us the latest from Minnesota if you've got any updates. But Balky, who's your favorite running back in Minnesota? Did you think Madison, or do you think Madison can take over that role?
He will take over the role. How well he hangs on to it is a matter of discussion. And that's why I'm kind of out on him as running back 19 as the end of the 5th round pick. That's where he's going in Fantasy Pros Championship drafts right now. I'm going to find another running back I like there better, JD. Madison could, I'm kind of with you. He could crush it. And if he looks like Dalvin Cook, he looks like Dalvin Cook, and I'll be crying myself to sleep at night. I'm good with that, right? But what I do like, and I haven't made up my mind on this, it's probably Chandler and McBride, and that's been the offseason conversation. What I do like is getting a piece of that later on, the guy behind the guy, to borrow the Swingers reference, right? You get a guy like Ty Chandler in the 15th round, you get a guy like Dwayne McBride in the 18th round. These are, especially if you're a volume drafter, grab Chandler in one draft, grab McBride, and then try to balance your shares out on that. I don't have a strong feeling on any of them. My only feeling here, Dan, is I'm kind of out on Madison at his current price, but I do like those guys behind him when you're talking about 10 plus rounds that these guys are going after Madison goes.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, Madison's price was a little bit more palatable when there was some question about whether Dalvin Cook was going to leave, because it was fairly obvious that he was probably going to leave. The Vikings they were giving all kinds of signals that they just weren't going to plan to keep him around. So. But once it became known that it was Madison's job, now he's bounced up into the, 4th, 5th round. And that's a little pricey for me, because the thing is he does everything all right, but he does nothing really well. And maybe on a good offense, maybe he's enough better than the other guys, maybe, but that's a lot of maybes in there. And I don't like saying that many maybes when I'm looking at somebody in the 5th round. I would rather feel a little bit stronger about him. If I can't feel that strong about any of the running backs around there, then I'll go grab a wide receiver or something. But I just don't like drafting question marks quite that early.
And we took one running back, Dan, in the first 8 rounds. I mean, these running backs in the first 10 rounds are like, what are those? What's the word I'm thinking about?
Landmines?
Landmines. Thank you, Balky. They're literally like landmines, and we're already starting Dan's laughing because I always forget a word.
This is a game we play often on the go.
It's the French. My brain goes to French. Yeah, my brain goes to French automatically when I can't think of the word. So they're like landmines, and like Dan said, the amount that you invest in them is really the factor there. If you're waiting later, and these guys are the guys that you're taking later are starting to move up because of the landmines that are blowing up early. But then those are where you're starting to see these guys fall. So you got to be careful in your builds, whether you're robust RB or zero RB. I mean, we're gonna keep seeing more injuries, right, guys? I mean, these guys are on the field now, so we're gonna start getting this news in, and it's gonna change a lot of the dynamics. Let's go to Chicago, where I thought I was on an island, kind of with the Fields, DJ Moore stackage, really feeling good about it. Now it's like everywhere, like everyone's loving that stack. Now everyone's feeling good about Fields. As a Packers fan, maybe give us like your quick rapid fire. How do you feel about this offense? And other than those two, is there anyone else you like in it?
I've heard so many people, so many smart people talk about how they're out on DJ Moore this year. Not necessarily saying I am, but it has gotten me a little bit skittish on drafting DJ Moore. My first pick of the Scott Fish Bowl was Justin Fields, so I'm obviously in on him this year. I don't think he needs to step up that much passing-wise in order to come through, and especially like Scott Fish or FFPC Superflex. I think he makes a lot of sense as your number one quarterback there. I like Cole Kmet. A guy who just signed a big extension there. I'm kind of out on Khalil Herbert. I like Rashawn Johnson a little bit later, although the distance between those two has gotten a little bit closer over the last couple of months. And kind of like Chase Claypool, I'm out. No thanks. Darnell Mooney, I'm pretty much out on. But I like Moore. I like Kmet there. And Alex, I'm kind of curious. I meant to actually ask you this, like with Fields when he was crushing it last season. Over the course of your high-stakes career, does Fields remind you of any other, big-time running backs? Is he comparable to Michael Vick? Is he comparable to some of these other running quarterbacks that have put up big numbers in high-stakes fantasy football over the years? Because I kind of like Fields this year, and I'm wondering if I'm misguided on that or if I'm on the right path.
No, I think Fields. I haven't been following the ADP, but he's the type of guy. I think what he did in spurts. At the end of last year, I think you could expect to see that for the entire year, obviously assuming he's healthy. And that's a big assumption because for a guy that, who runs like that, a little bit of Colin Kaepernick in him, like in terms of, Colin Kaepernick, remember he used to run like for 100 yards a game. Yeah. And then he kind of, crapped out for a few games. And, he could be potentially like a Cam Newton, where Cam was actually a pretty decent passer. He ran the ball, but he was a pretty decent passer. So if Fields could become a decent passer, I think the upside there, I think the upside is number one quarterback overall, honestly. But I don't know if that's crazy or not to say. But I think it's all about health.
It's not too crazy, Alex, because last year he gave us 2 QB1 weeks and he gave you 5 top 5 QB weeks. And we saw what that offense looked like. They added a lot of pieces, including DJ Moore, we talked about, fellow Canadian that's a little embarrassing right now, Chase Claypool. And then you've got, they've got 3 running backs that are, any one of these guys could pop and be the guy any week. It sounds like they, solidified the offensive line. So you got to think that there's an improvement there. And I think you're right. I think this guy, he can win you leagues. He can be the QB1. And that's why, I wanted to get the opinion of their nemesis over there in Green Bay.
Well, and I'll tell you this, JD, if a Canadian's out on Mapletron, I am out on Mapletron for sure. Like, there's what am I doing drafting Claypool at this point? And I'm glad Alex brought up Kaepernick. I actually went to journalism school with Colin Kaepernick's cousin. And so he was always filling my mind about Kaepernick and everything. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And so then I always felt like I overvalued him until he destroyed my Packers in the playoffs, not once, but twice. And I was kind of like, I know it's the smart thing to probably draft this guy. I couldn't do it, even though it would have brought me many, many victories here. As far as getting back to the Bears thing, the offense is going to be improved this year. And I'll tell you what, the NFC North is wide open. I'm not a Lions guy. That I already said the defense is going to be terrible. Quite frankly, guys, you could tell me Chicago, Minnesota, Green Bay, or Detroit wins this division this year, and I will not be surprised. I think all 4 teams can do it. If you're going to pin me down to a prediction, I'm going to side with Dan Williamson's Vikings, even though I think they're in for a regression of the mean. I still think top to bottom, they're probably the best team prepared to win this division this year. I think Green Bay is going to be good. I just don't think it's going to be in 2023. I think it's a year off, 2024. I think they get back to it. And I'll tell you this about the Lions, too. I've seen this so many times before where a team gets all this hype in 1 year, and then they fall flat on their face, and then everybody's out on them the following year. and then they come through in 2024. So I think it's going to be a great dogfight in 2024 between the Packers and Lions for the NFC North.
I agree, and I love the Vikings call. I don't know if you guys have seen quarterbacks, but I'm a big fan of Cousins, man. I love the story. I'd love to see that guy end his career with a Super Bowl, and I love the new coaching regime, and those two together seem to be meshing. So I expect that offense, especially if they can figure out the running back position, I expect them to definitely be a front runner. And I think you're right about Detroit. There might be a letdown there. Alex, do you have a favorite in this division?
Well, I think my favorite is going to be, some with the best. I think the number one quarterback or the most trustworthy quarterback. Let's put it this way: fantasy aside, is probably the guy that I would roll with. So, I guess that has to be Cousins.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, to Balky's point, I understand what he's saying about Minnesota, but I'm not sure Minnesota's defense is any better than Detroit's.
I think it's interesting you bring that up because I don't think they're great, but I do think like Detroit's is really bad, Dan. Like Minnesota's is not great, like it's nothing to write home about, but I do still think they're a notch above the Lions.
I'm still bearing scars from the playoff game against the Giants last year. Alex's Giants just absolutely. I mean, that was shades of basically shades of the 1969, whatever it was, when the Chiefs beat the Vikings in the Super Bowl, and Hank Stram was matriculating the team up and down the field. And that's exactly what the Giants were doing.
Did you guys in Minnesota? Did you guys think that feel comfortable at that game? Because I'll tell you, the mood in New York last year was that we were going to win that game. There was not because we're homers, but we really felt strongly about that game. The same way that the next week we thought we were going to get crushed, and we did against the Eagles. Well, how was Minnesota? What did you guys feel?
Well, this is Minnesota. We have a long history with the Vikings, so we know never to get too high. Never expect too much. I definitely went into it thinking, the Giants certainly can win this game. There's no question about it. I thought the Vikings, if they could just play some decent defense, they could probably win the game, and I think that would have been the case. But they just couldn't play decent defense. And hats off to Brian Daboll. They put together an excellent offensive game plan that really exploited some holes in the Vikings defense. And they couldn't adjust fast enough is what it came down to.
Dan, to that point about the Vikings defense and how you can exploit that this year for fantasy, I just took I was in a draft, slow draft. My fourth round pick, beg your pardon, TJ Hawkinson. I think that Vikings defense still leaves a lot to be desired this year. And I think about what they did in the offseason with Jordan Addison and the fact that they are not pumping any significant amount of either draft capital or cash into that backfield. Man, Kirk Cousins' arm is going to fall off this year. Jefferson's in for a big season. Hawkinson's in for a big season. You can make the case for Osborne late, Addison in the middle rounds too. So I think there's a lot to love about the Vikings. They had a team last year that was so successful in one-score games that it's really difficult for me to see them doing that again. And I think that's good for fantasy. I think it's good to invest in the Vikings this year because I think that while a lot of people might be down on the team itself, you should not be down on the offense, especially the passing portion of the offense. I think they put up big numbers this year.
Absolutely. That's a great point. When the circus comes to town, you want to be part of it. And the circus is definitely coming to Minnesota. And when we're talking fantasy, the circus is a bad defense with a good passing offense. So that's what we want to see, and that's what we got there. Same thing in Detroit. So I'm loading up on both teams.
Be a lot of shootouts in the NFC North.
Yeah, which is gonna be fun. They're kind of like the AFC North. So guys, this has been a blast. We appreciate you guys hanging with us tonight. He's at Eric Balkman. Balky, we appreciate you hanging with us tonight. Check out the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Alex, we appreciate your time. We appreciate everything you do, all the support you give, all the love you give, and not only to us, but to the community altogether. Thanks for spending the time tonight and giving us kind of that backstage view of the FFPC. Guys, myffpc.com. Use the code Underworld to get your initial discount. Dan, always a blast with you, my friend. Check out the Goat District YouTube channel. We've got Ballin'. I've got a Matty Kiwoom BBT coming out. Dan and I have the Owner's Lounge that we just released. And then we're going to have the pros versus Joes backstage version of Dan, myself, Theo, and Andrew.
Defending the belt.
The defense draft. Exactly. The title defense draft. So go check that out on the Goat District YouTube channel. It'll be, the draft will be there in the next 48 hours. Guys, you've been awesome tonight. We appreciate you guys spending the time. Make sure you get in those draft rooms, whether it's best ball redraft, go smash, and we'll check you all later.
Goat District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out PlayerProfiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.